Right, welcome everyone along to this meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee on Wednesday, 20th November 2024. On my left at the top table, we'll have Scott Walker as Head of Finance, the Vice Convener, also Council Leader, Grant Lang, and to my right is Kirsten, our Clerk, Lisa Simpson, Head of Legal, and also Claire Mailer. So can we move to the Kirsten? First of all, in fact, can I just ask, is there any apologies? I think there's at least one, and ask if members who are online, and there's probably two, if they can confirm when the clerk calls out their names. Kirsten.
Thanks, Convener. We have an apology from Bailey Ahern with Councillor Anderson substituting. Members, when I call out your name, can you please confirm you're present? Councillor Drysdale.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Promise McDade.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. And Councillor Shires.
Present.
Thank you. All other members are present in the Chambers, Convener.
Okay, thanks, Kirsten. Secondly, are there any declarations of interest? I take it there are none. So we now move to the minutes of the previous meeting, and that was the meeting that we held on Wednesday, 18th of September 2024. Can I ask, are there any matters arising, any questions that people might have on those minutes? Or are they a fair record of that meeting? Right, that being so, the minutes are accepted and approved. We now move on to the outstanding business statement. Before I come to the first item on that statement about Tayside contracts, the other three items, the actions have been completed. That was on the Warm Welcome project. I believe it is Councillor Illingworth that made the request there. On technology in schools, I think it's Councillor Barrett made the request. And also, and I'm not sure who it was again, but on the car park trading account. And responses have been circulated on all of these. The one that is still outstanding clearly is on Tayside contracts. And I know Lisa Simpson has been endeavouring to arrange a meeting, and it's not lack of effort on her part, but it is ongoing. But could I ask Lisa just to make a comment on this?
I think you've said it all, Convener. It's ongoing. We're still trying to get a date that suits all four parties to get together, and another chaser email has been sent.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I know you're very much trying, but it's got to be that they all come together. Right, I've got Councillor Cuthbert. Thanks for pointing that out. He wishes to make a comment. Dave.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, just to say that Tayside contracts, the 50% rule comes up at the meeting regularly, and there does seem to be some support from other councils on it. I am talking to the members of the GSG, and we're working together, so hopefully we'll see something come of that. There are other things in the minute of agreement that need to be looked at, and we are starting to push for that to be done. So hopefully we'll see some changes coming through.
Councillor Cuthbert, thank you very much and for your efforts. And it strikes me it's just a question of persistence and yet in keeping on going on this. I suspect it, this will come back on to the outstanding business statement, but we've got to keep pushing on this. Right, we now move to the next paper, and that is on revenue. And I'm going to hand over the chair on this paper to the Vice Convener and also obviously Council Leader, Grant Lang. So Grant, I'll let you chair.
Thanks very much, Convener. So we're on paper 5, the Revenue Budget Monitor Report update number 2, and I'm just going to pass over to Scott Walker, our Strategic Lead in Finance and Business Support, to introduce the report. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. This is the second revenue monitoring report for the current financial year and is based on our August ledger. Based on the latest monitoring, we're now projecting an overspend of £885,000 across the council. This is a welcome reduction of £713,000 since my last update in September. As ever, I need to stress that these are projections based on 5 months of financial data and are subject to change, but the direction of travel is positive. As is normal practice, the committee will receive further updates as the year progresses. In section 5 of the report, we provide an update on service revenue budgets. These projections do not yet include the actual financial impact of the current year pay award. In my next update in February, I'll be able to provide the committee with the actual financial consequences of the pay award and how it compares against our budget assumptions and the £2.099 million of funding provided by the Scottish Government. In addition, this update does not include the financial consequences of the strike action that took place at the end of October. Again, this will be included in my next update. Turning to the report before you, across all strategic lead functions, there is a projected overspend of £929,000 or 0.3% of total net service expenditure. This is a reduction of £473,000 from my last update in September, and I'll take you through the main movements. In education and learning, the projected overspend has increased by £291,000. This is a net movement made up of, in the main, a projected increase in the cost of home-to-school transport, which is partially offset by additional staff slippage. At this time, devolved school management budgets are projected to be on track, and there is a projected £100,000 underspend on the Pupil Equity Fund. Across children and families and justice, whilst the budget remains on target, we are still experiencing pressures in residential placements, which is currently being contained within the overall budget. In environment and infrastructure, we're now projecting an underspend of £530,000. The main reasons for this positive movement firstly relate to staff slippage across the service, and secondly to the twin stream collection service, in which we're seeing savings on contract spend, as well as additional income from recyclates. There are also positive movements across housing and communities, property, customer and digital, and finance and business support. These positive movements are partially offset by a small projected overspend in economy, development and planning. In section 6, we provide an update on our corporate budgets, which includes the Health and Social Care Partnership and the Council Tax Reduction Scheme. Firstly, for Health and Social Care, on the 23rd of September, the Audit and Risk Committee of the Perth and Cnoss Integration Joint Board were advised of a projected overspend after the application of reserves and non-recurring funding in the current year of £1.637 million. On the 2nd of October, Perth and Cnoss Integration Joint Board approved a financial recovery plan. At that time, this plan was anticipated to reduce the projected overspend in the current year to £337,000, all of which relate to health services. The IGB are scheduled to receive a further update on the 11th of December. Appendix 3 to the report provides a high-level summary of the current year position for the IGB and the financial recovery mitigations identified to date. There remains a significant risk in relation to future budgets if recurring mitigations are not identified, and our committee will receive further updates as they become available. Demand for the Council Tax Reduction Scheme remains high, and despite the increase to the budget this year, we're projecting an overspend of £150,000. Section 7 provides an update on council tax and non-domestic rates collection levels. In-year council tax collection levels remain positive at 63.54%. This is slightly lower than the 5-year average and the position at the same time last year. However, we do continue to see increases in the actual level of income and are now projecting an additional £250,000 in council tax, which is reflected in Appendix 1. Section 8 includes commentary on our ALIOs, TASI contracts and the Housing Revenue Account. Section 9 includes information on additional revenue support grants and other grants for the current financial year. Section 10 sets out adjustments between budget headings that result in no change in the level of council spend. And Section 11 includes updates on our reserves position, where we're seeking approval for transfers in and out of several earmarked reserves, including feasibility studies and council-approved expenditure. The report also seeks your approval to apply unearmarked reserves to two proposals. Firstly, £190,000 to the Health and Social Care Partnership to provide focused care and support for those people most at risk of deconditioning leading to hospital or residential admissions. And secondly, £200,000 to the Insurance Fund, which is under pressure due to rising premiums over the last couple of years. It is likely that the Insurance Fund will be a recurring expenditure pressure at a higher value that we will ask you to approve in setting the 25-26 revenue budget in February. On the basis that the proposals within this report are agreed, we're projecting earmarked reserves of £28.65 million and unearmarked reserves of £15.106 million, or 3.2%. Finally, Section 12 includes a section on financial risks. These include updated risks around funding for pay and the Health and Social Care Partnership. Since the report was issued, I have had confirmation that councils will receive their share of £86.2 million towards employers' superannuation costs for teachers, which is currently identified as a risk. Future updates to the committee on these risks will be provided as information becomes available. Reporting a projected overspend to the committee is always disappointing, but hopefully you and elected members will see that we're moving in the right direction. As I said earlier, this update is only based on 5 months of activity. The committee can also be assured that officers will continue to put in place measures to address this, and the impact will be reflected in future updates. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mr. Walker, for that comprehensive summary of the report that's in front of us. So I'll open up to questions, and it's first of all with Councillor Peter Barrett, please.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. Paragraph 517 of the report refers to the projected overspend on Perth Harbour of £70,000. I know that you wrote to Transport Scotland at the end of August, trying to seek clarity on what the timescale was for the consultation, and at the end of September they advised you that they were in the final stages of the pre-consultation stage, and that the formal 42-day consultation period would start as soon as possible. 56 days later, can you tell me, has that formal consultation period begun?
Thanks for the question, and I think across the chamber there's a frustration about the timescale that has been taken, and I think I will hand over to Serge Morone to fully answer the question. The answer I'm getting back really is this is the first time they've ever closed a commercial port, and there's not a set pathway to do this, but that doesn't help if you're taking a month to respond to letters. So I'll pass over to Serge. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Councillor Barrett. Yeah, I can give you an update on where we are with our discussion with Transport Scotland. As you mentioned, the council leader wrote to them, and we had to send a few reminders to get an answer to that letter, but we had that answer. However, and in that answer, obviously, they were stating that they were close to finalising the public notice, which will lead to the public consultation. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, they sent another request for information that we had to answer, and we sought an immediate meeting with them following that request, and we have had the meeting, and we are gathering the information that they needed, and the information should be sent to them this week. We hope that that will help us to finalise the public notice and potentially start the consultation in December.
Thanks, Serge. My feeling on it as well, if it would expedite anything, I'm quite happy if the committee is agreeable to write again, stressing the frustration that we as a local authority, and especially this committee, are, and quite happy to write it. And if anybody else wants to sign that letter, I'm happy to organise that over the next day or two. Councillor Barrett.
Vice Convener, thanks very much for that, and I appreciate the efforts that you're making. I'm disappointed that we've got to the stage where we're getting yet another kind of last minute a request for more information. And I realise that there have been changes of personnel at senior level in Transport Scotland, but it doesn't give me confidence about the way that they're actually handling this. At the formal opening of the Leitham for All hub, or the hub, I did try and buttonhole the Transport Minister and local MP Jim Fairley on this subject, and at that stage I think we were still giving Transport Scotland the benefit of the doubt. I think we're kind of beyond that, and I think in addition to writing to Transport Scotland, I'd very happily sign a letter, joint letter with you to Jim Fairley to see what the Minister can do to expedite this. Thank you.
And if everybody's agreeable, I'm quite happy to do that. Okay, Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, my question is maybe quite technical, but I'm just curious to know how the pay award top-ups are going to be allocated. Specifically, I'm thinking about Tayside contracts, because my understanding is that they're part of our cohort of employees. What I don't want to see is it being allocated somewhere else, then us getting a bill from them at the end of the year, which we have to take out of reserves. So it's a question of how we account for it in the accounts. Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
Yep. Okay. So we will receive £2.099 million from the Scottish Government towards the pay award. We understand that Tayside contracts will bill us actually pretty soon for their contribution from that amount. Therefore, there should be no adjustment later on required in this financial year, because the bills will then be up to date, and going forward, the rates charged will reflect the updated pay awards.
Thanks, and that's a much better position than we've been in years gone past. And again, commend you and other members on that, the Tayside Joint Board, Tayside Conduits Joint Board, for endeavouring to push forward sensible suggestions. So thanks for your work on that. Councillor John Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. My question was in relation to the statement in paragraph 6.3 about the Health and Social Care Partnership overspend and the further details that are in Appendix 3. All of Appendix 3 shows that all of the overspend sits within the health side of the Health and Social Care Partnership. Can you just remind us if that liability sits wholly, partially with us, or with the NHS? Thank you.
I think I'll go initially to Mr. Walker.
So under the terms of the integration scheme, that sits with NHS Tayside. We would only pick up the share of the social care part of any final overspends.
Thanks. We're down to second questions now from Councillor Barrett.
And thanks, Vice Convener. My reading of the health and social care content in the report and Appendix 3 was slightly different from Councillor Duff's. It looked to me like there's an almost £5 million overspend in the social care part of health and social care, which is down to us, and all of that is being met with non-recurring monies through from reserves. Now I know that we did get an update about the recovery plan following questions at the previous SPNR meeting, but it does strike me that addressing £5 million worth of overspend with non-recurring funding isn't sustainable, and it does signal that there are going to be severe challenges in the health and social care budget process that we're just about to enter into. I wondered if we could get any further information on what recurring measures are being implemented to address both the structural deficit and the pressures for the future, and other plans to give detailed briefings to groups as part of the budget process.
I'm sure there are plans for that, but I'll go to Donna Mitchell, please. Donna.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Donna Mitchell, Chief Financial Officer for Health and Social Care. Thank you for your question. That's correct. There is a £4.8 million, just as is in Appendix 3, of an unanticipated overspend within social care. The recovery plan does address us to take down just to close to balance, and as Councillor Duff had pointed out, the balance that does remain does sit within health services. The plans that we have in place to identify recurring solutions for the £5 million overspend, not all of that expenditure we are anticipating to have next year. However, we are expected to have expenditure in addition to that, perhaps for different reasons. The main recurring pressures that we have going into 25-26 sits around a recurring deficit. So we're aware going into this financial year that there was a £2 million recurring deficit in social care, and that has been met this year through non-recurring funds and reserves, as you can see. We also have a pressure around unfunded pay uplift, so pay uplift for Perth and Kinross Council employed staff. We also are finding an unprecedented level of increased need in the services that we deliver. This is particularly being seen in social care around care packages and care home placements, and the numbers most recently from February of this year have increased in a way that we hadn't predicted. We had built in quite a substantial amount of recurring funding across a number of services to balance the budget, to attempt to balance the budget and ensure that we weren't being unrealistic in our setting of the budget. However, services are increasing in addition to that. So we have quite a significant amount of work to do, and that work is well underway. We have an IGB budget review group meeting tomorrow with voting members, and the budget review group hasn't stopped to meet throughout the financial year. We have a transformation programme that sits under the financial strategy of the IGB. So this financial strategy is looking at delivering efficiency across all services where possible. It's looking transforming services where possible to ensure that they're sustainable and fit for the future. And that programme is underway and particularly focuses on, in regards particularly in social care, around care at home and rehabilitation. And also has a complex care transformation in there too. The final part of the financial strategy is looking at around prioritising our services and looking at any reductions that may need to happen. So the IGB are well aware that difficult decisions may be required and that the gap in budget next year may be substantial.
Thanks, Donna, and I don't know if Jackie's got anything to add to that, but I think part of Councillor Barrett's question was, will detailed presentations be given to each group so that everybody can understand the pressures that are on the IGB and the important work they carry out? So I think that would be definitely a yes, but I just want you to confirm that.
Yes, sorry, I missed that part of the question. That's correct. We're more than happy to do briefings across all groups.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jackie, do you have anything to add to that?
Just to say that absolutely it's really important that elected members across the chamber fully understand the position in relation to social care, our changing population needs and the decisions that will be put to the IGB in terms of their strategic direction. So very happy to participate in as many and for as long as is required to ensure that we've got that shared understanding of the position that we're in.
Thanks, Jackie, and it's good to see that your computer has recovered from the previous meetings, and we could hear you perfectly well. So thank you. Councillor Barrett, are you satisfied with that?
Very much so, thank you.
Next question is Deputy Provost Andrew Park.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. I'm at 5.23 on page 15 with regard to waste disposal. It's very welcome to see that projected underspend of £350,000, but is that underspend more a result of, if you like, caution in estimating the benefits that would accrue from the grey bin scheme, or is it more to do with an uplift in the prices we're being offered for recyclates, which may not persist? Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Walker.
Yep, thank you. So if I could take you to Appendix 2 on page 31. we provide a bit more information in terms of the split of that 350,000. So 150,000 of it is relating to expenditure in terms of the contract, and £200,000 relates to the income we're generating from the recyclers.
Okay, so we're going to the second question now from Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Mr Walker gave us some helpful update about the National Insurance contribution uplift in relation, I think it was just the teachers' pay, if I remember correctly, but I wondered if you had any update on what the additional burden for the council would be in terms of National Insurance contributions for our remaining employees, and whether there is any discussions ongoing about the likelihood of us receiving monies to cover these as well. Thank you.
Scott.
Yeah, so sorry, just to be clear, when I made the remarks earlier, and that was about teachers' pension contributions. I think you're now asking about National Insurance, yeah? Yeah, okay, sorry. So in the budget, there was obviously there was two changes. There was the 13.8% to 15%, and there was the changes in thresholds. We estimate that was going to cost Perth and Ross Council around about £5.4 million, with 1.8 of it being around about the change in percentage and 3.6 million being around about the change in thresholds. There are discussions going at a national level in terms of whether that money will flow through from the UK Treasury to the Scottish Government. Those discussions are ongoing. There is a risk we won't have certainty about that when we ask you to set the budget in February. So we may be proceeding at risk, as you did with the teachers' superannuation, but we'll keep budget review groups updated as the process evolves. And just to be clear, I understand the funding, if there is funding for National Insurance, that's not been in any of the headline figures that have come forward on the back of the budget.
And just for clarity, Mr Walker, for services that we contract in as a council, all the National Insurance will have to be borne by these as well, which will put as a risk to mean that our contract prices will ultimately rise by the same amount or more.
Absolutely, yeah. So the figures I quoted were for Perth and Ross Council. We've got Alios, we've got Tayside contracts, we've got suppliers. That cost will fall in as well.
Thanks for that. Councillor Eric Drysdale.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and you took part of the words out of my mouth there with your follow-up question there. However, I did have another question, which is in relation to 5.18 tourism, culture and place, and a projected overspend of 150,000 in relation to the delivery of previously approved savings from the review of Alios. Can somebody please give a little more detail on what is contained within that 150,000, and is there any particular Alio that has not managed to achieve these savings?
I'll ask David Littlejohn to respond to that if you can, please.
Yeah, the saving relates to the review of the Alios that we agreed to undertake last year. So that saving was across all the Alios, and it was designed to look at how we could make efficiencies across the operation of the Alios, from everything from their the kind of back office support through to some more fundamentals about the number of Alios that we have. So that review took a bit longer than we'd expected to get underway. It is now underway, but those savings have not yet been able to be achieved at this time.
Thank you. If I may quickly follow up and just ask, is there a revised timescale for achieving these savings?
The review has now started. I couldn't give you a definitive answer right now, but I can get it to you what the current timescale will be for the conclusion. There's been a delay because we had needed to recruit a project manager to work with the steering group and the Alio chief executive. We've been unable thus far to recruit a project manager. So there is a real workload issue between the ALIOs and ourselves in getting this underway. But I will get back to you when I can just kind of finalise the date. I wouldn't like to second guess that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just a quick question on paragraph 8.9, which talks about the trading surplus from Tayside contracts and the fact that we've got £550,000 built into the budget for that. We may or may not get it. I wonder, when was the last time we actually received a share of surplus from Tayside contracts?
Oh, I can answer a bit of that for you before. We've received that every year, a surplus, but the surplus comes on the back of us giving them, as the technical accounting term, a gob of money, and then we get a surplus back from that. So I think that's changing by good work by Councillor Cuthbert and others, so that we stop doing that. But I will let Mr. Walker spell out it in more professional terminology.
So I think the last time we received a genuine surplus would have been 1920. There's been subsidy through 2019-20.
I'm really worried about all the figures in here now.
The year 2019-20, financial year 1920. Since then, there's been adjustments through COVID times, through inflation times, where all three councils have made contributions later in the year, as Councillor Cuthbert referred to earlier on, in order to support Tayside contracts.
We're just reflecting on the validity of kind of putting that amount into our budget expectations, I think. Maybe that's for us to consider come February. Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any further questions on this report? Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I was looking at the home to school transport increase in section 5.10. But reading the rest of and I understand that a large portion of that will be for ASN pupils. When we had an ASN workshop for Sweetly Performance members last week, we were also told about a coming pressure on independent sector placements from ASN, and I wondered whether there was any. I thought I heard you mention it in your introduction, but maybe I didn't. There's a coming pressure down the line on ASN placements in the independent sector, and I wondered whether there wasn't any overspend to report at this point in time.
To Mr. Walker or Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. Perhaps Claire Palmer can jump in. So I was talking about home to school transport, and I think a significant element does relate to ASNs. Claire, is there anything you want to add in terms of the independent school element?
Yeah, in Appendix 2, we are actually showing that there is a projected overspend in independent school, special school, specifically for this report of 330,000. So that is separate to the home to school element, but there is the part of the pressure around the home to school will be linked to those placements.
Okay, thanks. I can see it now that you say it in Appendix 2. It just wasn't in the covering report commentary. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Do we have any further questions? Okay, feel like an auctioneer there waiting to bring the hammer down on it. So there's no further questions. So I will move the report. Councillors, this is the second review monitoring update for financial year 24-25. Scott Walker has already provided us with a detailed commentary on the contents of the report, so I will not go into much further great detail. I know that we're still projecting an overspend of £885,000 in the current financial year, and these projections are a moving feast and will undoubtedly change. They will be kept under review, and we will receive further updates throughout the financial year. However, I very much welcome that this position has almost halved our position since our last update in September, and I want to thank officers for the steps they've taken to date. One of the major factors contributing to this positive movement is the success of the twin stream collection service, or grey bins. And therefore, I want to take this opportunity to not only thank officers for the way they've handled and introduced the scheme, but also to thank members of the public for their support and embracing this positive move, which not only benefits us financially, but also supports our climate change ambitions. I also note the update on the financial position of the Perth and Kinross Integration Joint Board. The IGB appears to have taken steps to manage the current year, but there remains a concern as to how this may impact on the finances of the council in future years. And I know members will welcome presentations from the board representatives in the coming weeks. I also welcome the latest council tax projections, which set out additional income of £250,000 and will contribute to frontline service delivery. I'd also like to draw the committee's attention to a couple of proposals in the report that impact on our reserves position. Firstly, we are applying £190,000 to support our home care service to minimise hospital and residential care admissions. Secondly, we are being proactive in managing our insurance fund by applying £200,000 in the current year. I also note that this is likely to come back as a larger recurring pressure in the 25-26 final revenue budgets, as insurance premiums are increasing across the board. Councillors, there is another issue which I must bring to your attention today. Since this paper was published, the council has been approached by the Crannog Centre. They are experiencing cash flow challenges due to factors beyond their control. I have asked officers to continue working with the Crannog Board to get more of an understanding of these challenges. However, in order to provide a level of confidence to the Crannog Board over the next few months, I want to add a further recommendation to the report. Simply, I want to underwrite the Crannog Centre with a financial contribution of up to £50,000 from unearmarked reserves. These monies will only be paid if required, and I will delegate this to our Chief Finance Officer to ensure that everything is in order. I hope you can support this proposal and understand why it has come so late in the day. Finally, in relation to the Crannog proposal, I appreciate the committee had no opportunity to ask questions on this, so once I've moved this report, I will open up to questions. We're happy to go officers to for any clarification. Turning back to the paper before us today, I remain confident that with this council's reputation for sound financial management, we can weather this storm. We're showing a positive direction of travel, but must not get complacent. As I said earlier, I would like to place on record my thanks to the Chief Executive and all the staff across the whole of the council for their continued efforts. I look forward to receiving further updates throughout the course of this financial year. And before I move the paper, I know that there may be some members of the Crannog Board in attendance, and they won't have had a chance to declare an interest at the start of the meeting. So I'll give them the chance to do that after I move the paper, which I'm doing now. So I'll move the paper. So I'll be looking for any declarations of interest.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yes, declaration of interest as a board member for the Scottish Crannog Centre Trust. Thank you.
Just to say, I wish to second the paper and including the proviso with regard to the Crannog Centre. So I second.
So, but we'll open it for any questions if anybody has any questions. Don't see any questions. All questions coming now from Councillor David Illingworth.
Thank you, Vice Convener. When we're supporting the Crannog Centre, what criteria will there be for releasing funds from this £50,000?
Mr. Walker?
So we've been provided with estimated cash flows over the next year or so, which has identified difficulties. They are projections. We'll be working with them. Thomas has met with Crannog colleagues. I will be involved in terms of the cash flow, so we'll be keeping it, and I can assure you we will only be making the payments if it's actually required. It's an underwriting, as Councillor Lang said, so it's not a grant award, it's an underwriting.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Collins-Stewart.
So thank you, Vice Convener, but before my question, just to follow up on that. So to understand properly, it's repayable from the Crannog Centre to the council if as and when the cash flow situation improves.
I don't think it will actually be paid to them unless the situation is needed. This is just to give them comfort that it's, you know, something that they can take. So we'll not actually be giving them the money to start with initially.
So we'll only give them money if they need it in terms of their projections, in terms of their cash flow. It will not be repayable because that would be a loan. And if it's a loan, we would need council approval to make loans. So it may turn into a grant. It's an underwriting that may turn into a grant to keep them going over the short term.
Okay, so that's, I think my understanding of cash flow may be deficient then, because I would have assumed that cash flow was cash on hand at any particular point in time rather than a projected deficit, no?
So the cash flows we've been provided with show the Crannog Centre entering negative cash flow over the coming months. We may need to provide them funding in order to turn it positive, and then that stays positive. So therefore, if it's required, it may not come back.
And there are other funding funders that are assisting in the endeavour. Thomas Glenn, please, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Just to follow up on Councillor Stewart's questions and the comments already made by Mr Walker. This approach was made. It was for a sum which was larger than that we've put in front of you today. We have engaged with Crannog, we have engaged with other funders, and we also know that the reasons for the cash flow issues are ongoing discussions with a number of other external parties to the Crannog. So that's why that cash flow position is subject to potential change. We've sought to minimise the amount of underwriting that we have brought forward here to FNR, but as Mr Walker highlights, there is the potential, if those conversations with third parties don't secure funds which they are seeking to bring into the Crannog, then it would require us to meet the up to £50,000 through the award of a grant. We've been speaking directly to the Ganachie on the initial figure requested from Crannog, and they are supportive in principle of working with the council to help the Crannog in the short term.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So just in terms of the original wording that was up there, my original question was going to be what are the nature of the challenges, and also what are the factors beyond the control of the Crannog Centre?
Thomas or Scott?
Again, happy to come in, Deputy Convener. At this point in this forum publicly, that's not information that we are able to share because they're subject to separate processes ongoing between Crannog and those organisations. But if it's helpful to members, we can have a conversation with Crannog and look to provide a form of briefing that we are able to share on a private basis after the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I'll go to comments and Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, convener. I think certainly applaud the performance in terms of the recycling and the income generation through waste streams from the grey lidded bins. Just want to reflect on some of the other comments that were made during questions time. I think the discussion that they had with regard to the home to school transport is apposite, and looking at the figures there, it would look like the home to school transport budget is something like £10 million in total, if 1% of it comes to 100,000. So clearly, in the words of yourself, Council Leader, that's a big gob of money. I'm not aware of any transformation or innovation programmes with regard to home to school transport, and it might be worth considering what innovation and flexible ways of working could be brought to bear with regard to that budget, to see what savings could be or efficiencies could be driven for the future. With regard to Tayside contracts and another big gob of money, if they are going to come looking to us to seek a contribution towards their revenue funding, then I would think the least or the smallest condition I would put on that was we will have had the first meeting and substantive progress made with regard to improving and modernising governance of Tayside contracts before we will consider giving you another penny, and I hope that we've got agreement for that in the chamber. I'm slightly wrong-footed by the Crannog stuff. I was at the Walled Garden yesterday to see some of the staff and volunteers there and give them some litter pickers to clear up round about Murray Royal Hospital grounds, which was great work that they're doing. But at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they were all sitting in a dark, unheated porta cabin, wearing overcoats and woolly hats, and they're clearly trying to economise on their heating and lighting and energy bills. So I think there are a lot of really good causes out there who are struggling to make ends meet, and kind of ad hoc fashion of dealing with this is not one that I really agree with. The other thing that's just struck me, so I might have to just absent myself from this discussion, is that after the official opening of the Crannog, which I couldn't attend due to COVID, but made it up there a week or so later when I was free of the virus, we actually took out a lifetime membership of the Crannog Society, and I don't know whether that has a bearing on whether I should declare an interest. I don't think it gets me any privileges apart from free entry for the rest of life. Lisa's shaking her head, so thank you for that, Lisa. But I think if we'd known about this sooner, then we might have been able to sort of think it through better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think Claire Miller would like to come in with a point of clarity, but it is my belief that there is a transformation and change within the with officers looking at the home to transport, and in fact, I believe that there's a pilot underway, but I could be completely wrong, so I'll get Claire Miller to give some clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. You've just given the point of clarification that I was going to make. We have got the wider public transport review that elected members obviously are aware of, and as part of that we have got widened the scope, and home to school transport is part of that review. There is a small test of change that is underway at the moment, and I anticipate, I can see Elaine on the call, but I'm anticipating that we will have an update to elected members in terms of progress and next steps towards the end of this year. We've got a workshop session planned, in fact, next week, so more information to come on that.
Elaine, would you like to make a further comment on that, on Councillor Barrett's comment?
Just to echo what Claire said there, yeah, we're implementing, it's a small test of change regarding how we deliver our school transport, utilising our own staff, but as Claire has alluded to, we will be providing a briefing because we're just coming to the end of the small test of change. We're just reviewing it and looking to extend it further, but there'll be further information provided in due course.
Peter.
Thanks very much for that. Appreciate that. And I also realised that I'd forgotten to go back to the Health and Social Care partnership. I want to thank Jackie and Donna for their offer of a briefing. Claire McLaren to my right made the courageous decision to volunteer for our BRG this year, and maybe I'll live to regret that. But I think as a matter of urgency, our group will be seeking that briefing, and if it's off the shelf and ready for next week, then we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Provost McDade, Xander.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Yes, I think we've outlined a number of challenges that we're experiencing, and I'm pleased with a lot of the work that is going on in terms of transformation. I appreciate that health and social care is a challenge for us, but actually I think we are actually in a better position than a lot of local authorities, and I think that is down to the work of members of the IJB and the leadership team there in terms of Jackie and Donna and others. So I would express my thanks and support to them for that, because having been in their shoes as a member of the IJB previously, it's a very difficult situation at the best of times, but when the money is as difficult as it is and the pressures are as high as they are, it's even more challenging. So having spoken to members in other local authorities, I think that although we are in a difficult position, we are not in as difficult a position as some. So I think that is worth reflecting. I just want to also echo your support for providing the Crannog with effectively some comfort that there is an emergency backstop there should they require it. I think it's worth reflecting that this is not just a local organisation, but actually a national heritage centre for and something that we are lucky and fortunate to have here in Perth and Kinross, but actually is something that does work on a national level and does a lot around supporting asylum seekers and rehabilitation of former prisoners, etc. So I think they are doing a lot of good work, and I think they are requiring just a bit of interim support, having had a number of issues out with their control, as you outlined, which allow them to get through. And I think it's worth us providing that bit of comfort to them and other funders that the council is supportive of their long-term, whilst giving them respectful challenge, as I know has been going on in the background. So very supportive of that move as well. Mr. Convener.
Thanks very much, Provost. I think your comments about the elected members on the IJB and the people who work within it, the officers, are tackling it in the right way, that they've recognised the problem and making headway and planning ahead rather than wait until the budget position actually meets them next year. So I know that it's an inordinate amount of work. Just by watching from the sidelines, I can see that. So I think our thanks, I reiterate your thanks to them for the work they've done. And on that note, I think I go to Colin Stewart.
I'm happy to defer to Councillor Rebick, who I think has been polite enough to have to be skipped over.
I was happy to be skipped over, Councillor Stewart. It won't be the first time. It certainly won't be the last, I suspect. But I'll go for it anyway. Actually, you referenced a couple of things. You referenced the scrutiny review that you're undertaking on additional support need and the potential pressure that residential care and an independent establishment might take. So it feels like appropriate to comment very briefly on both. I think as convener of Learning and Families, it's something that I genuinely really welcome. You and I have had a conversation or two about it. I welcome the scrutiny, I welcome the review. I think the rising need that pupils have with additional support needs is a challenge, but our better understanding of them is also an opportunity. It's something that myself as convener and our group as an administration
take really seriously. It's really important work, so we welcome that. I think in terms of the potential pressure that may or may not come about either now or in the future in terms of residential care for kids with additional support need is a valid one. And I think notwithstanding the fact that that will occasionally be the only way to deal with a pupil's challenge and additional support need, there will be times where that's the appropriate way to go. I think it does, however, underlines the importance of us dealing properly with additional support need right from the very start. Never more has early intervention been important. It's important that we support all our pupils with any kind of additional support need and or adverse childhood experience. Not only is it the right thing to do from the point of view of moral compass, it actually will save us money in the long term as well. So that was what I wanted to say. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Rewick, and go back up to Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thanks, Councillor Rewick, as well for what you were saying about our proposed scrutiny review of additional support needs. There was a couple of points from Councillor Barrett that Councillor Barrett had mentioned that I just wanted to pick up on. I think that the first time I was involved in a budget review process, our home to school transport budget was somewhere in the region of £6 or £7 million. So, you know, that is I mean, it's a huge chunk anyway, but it's increasing. So it's really helpful, I think, to hear about the test of change. I think Elaine described it as a small test of change. Let's hope we can have some big tests of change as well, because it's a big amount of money. The other thing I just wanted to focus in on was, you know, while we appropriately praise officers for all the work that they do in terms of achieving financial balance, I think that contribution from our residents in terms of the twin stream recycling is definitely one worth lauding, I think, from 2 High Street, because my understanding is that the contamination rates have subsided drastically. There we go, new word. How the contamination rates in those recycling streams have drastically reduced, and that's going to help contribute to the that financial saving as well. I just wanted to draw that to people's attention. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. And yes, it just shows the home to school transport and everything else is bound together with the rising demand in ASN, which pushes the transport costs up. And I think we're up over £11 million a year now, and that's to do with always to do. I'm trying not to laugh at the thing in the chat, but that's to do with our rurality and getting people to and from school. So thanks very much. If there are no more comments, then I'm happy to move the report. Oh no, can we agree the report? Thank you.
Okay, we now move to item 6 on the agenda, and that's the Composite Capital Budget Report for 2024 to 2030, and also the Housing Investment Programme for 2024 to 2029. And once again, can I ask Scott Walker to speak to the report and introduce it? And I think John Jennings is online as well. Yeah.
So thank you, Convener. This report provides an update on progress with the Council's 6-year composite capital budget through to 29-30 and the Housing Investment Programme to 28-29, based on expenditure to the 30th of September. Section 5 and Appendix 1 to the report sets out the updated resources of just under £620 million that are available to support the composite capital budget through to 29-30. This is £500,000 more than the position I reported in September, and the reasons for the movement are included in the table at paragraph 5.3. The table at paragraph 5.8 also sets out a reduction in our overall borrowing requirement of £1.773 million through to 29-30, primarily due to the receipt of additional capital grants in the current year. Section 6 and Appendix 2 set out progress on the delivery of the Composite Capital Programme by Strategic Lead, together with recommended adjustments to the budget. Net expenditure to the 30th of September was £65.245 million, or 39% of the projected outturn. This level of spend is consistent with last year and underlines the consistent progress being made on the delivery of the Composite Capital Budget. Adjustments in the Environment and Infrastructure portfolio are set out in Section 6.2. The adjustments are in the main rephasings of approved budgets to match expenditure plans. At Section 6.3, we include an update on housing and communities. Paragraph 6.3.2 includes the proposal to incur prudential borrowing to purchase a new community transport vehicle for the Glenfarg Community Transport Group, which will be funded by a contribution from the revenue budget. Again, there are several adjustments to align expenditure with approved budgets, and these are set out in the table at paragraph 6.3.3. The most significant adjustment within economy, development and planning relates to Perth and Kinross placemaking. At paragraph 6.4.2, we're seeking authority to rephase £3.598 million to 26-27. This will allow the public consultation on the Perth City Centre development and design framework to be undertaken. The remainder of this section includes updates on property and customer and digital services. Finally, in relation to the Composite Programme, Appendix 4 to the report provides an overview of progress on the significant General Fund capital projects. At Section 7, we provide an update on the Housing Investment Programme, which will incur £97 million of investment over the next 5 years. There are several adjustments set out in paragraphs 7.4 and 7.5. This section also includes an update on the Council House buyback scheme. To date, we have purchased 73 properties with a further 19 scheduled for completion by the end of the calendar year. In concluding, the overview in Section 8 provides some key information on our spend levels. In summary, on the Composite Programme, we're projecting to spend £168.433 million, or 85% of the original 24-25 budget. And on the Housing Investment Programme, we're projecting to spend £28.161 million, or 131% of the original budget. As members will be aware from both this current and previous reports, there are significant financial challenges in delivering the Council's capital ambitions, at a time when the Council is already on site with several major projects, and borrowing costs are higher than they've been over the last decade. The Council took steps to begin to address this when it set the 24-25 final revenue budget back in February, with a recurring increase to the loan charges budget. The Council also agreed to apply 1% of future council tax revenues per year to support the capital budget. As I've said before, this will not be enough, and all things being equal, the Council will have to apply additional revenue resources to support the capital budget going forward. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have any questions? First of all, Councillor McEwen. Tom.
Thank you very much, Convener. Scott, you mentioned your Appendix 4, the significant capital projects that are coming forward, and on top of that list, and I think the most significant of all these projects is Bulgaria Recreation Centre in my ward to serve East Perthshire. Can I get an update on how that's going on, whether we're going to meet the very close timelines that are coming, and if there's any projection at this early stage on the budget, etc. for it?
Stephen Crawford. Stephen.
Thank you for the question. The project remains on programme, and I would like to think, subject to the transition from the old REC to the new REC, and the prelims which are for the secondary school are happening at that time, and again the RECs are a key part of that, early in the new year the recreation centre with Lal should be open for the public.
Anything? That's fine. Right.
I don't need to come back. I'll make comments.
Okay.
Later.
Colin Stewart. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. I've just closed my pile of papers. I wanted to ask about 6.6 customer and digital services, and the switch from Swift to Mosaic. I think, again, that is something that I've been hearing about for as long as I've been a councillor. We're now experiencing a further delay and an increase in the cost of £450,000. Can I first of all ask, how much of a delay is this until February 2025? So it's a delay from when until February 2025? And how are we managing the increasing costs? This seems to be, I think, maybe the first time the first time that this enormous increase has been sort of floated with elected members, and I would have maybe expected a bit more control further upstream.
Okay, and I hear what you say, because indeed I think it's a matter that came up even on audit committee something like 3-4 years ago, and I remember seeing at least a couple of reports on that. I'm going to go straight to Alan Taylor on this one. Alan.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Thanks for the question. I am assuming you can hear me okay. So, first of all, there has been discussions for some time on the project, but you may recall an awful lot of those early discussions related to the procurement, which was undertaken nationally by Scotland Excel, and that procurement exercise collapsed. So that did cause a significant delay. Thereafter, once we got going in a proper manner, if I could put it that way, and it wasn't just business cases and trying to procure a supplier for the system. The most recent update that I'm aware of here to Finance and Resources Committee was in the APR update of the 7th of June last year, and we had the usual APR format about what we said we would do and what we did do, etc. So in what we said we would do, we had comments on the potential go live date, which we'd been exploring in late 2023 originally. And at the time we said that was very ambitious. And in what we said we would do now, we said that the supplier's project plan had been reviewed with our advisors, a company called BetterGov, and we were aiming for a new go live date that was going to be around February or March 2024. Now, following those discussions, we actually agreed on a go live date of June 2024. Now, when I say we have full governance in place. We have Jackie Pepper as a sponsor of a board and me as the chair of a steering group for the implementation of this project. So it's not me, it's when I say we, it's the proper due governance for this project that agreed on the date. When we got to June 2024, however, there was significant issues in terms of the aspects of the system that relate to the assessment and charging, i.e. the billing of clients, and the testing in that regard wasn't complete. So we revised the date to November. And in terms of your question, it was the 19th of November from memory. So that is when we intended to go live. Most recently, in our recent steering groups and boards, the discussions have related to the fact that we still have to undertake what's called a data migration exercise now that we have resolved issues that related to the testing and assessment and charging. And we also have issues in terms of ensuring that we have brokerage in place within the Health and Social Care Partnership. So the new proposed date is the 11th of February 2025. I would need Scott to confirm how much site elected members have had of this figure, but the figure relates to the additional work that requires to be done to support us as an organisation by the two companies involved, BetterGov, our advisors, and what we call TAG, which is the Access Group, who are the providers of the Mosaic system. So while it may seem a lot of money, it's for the additional work that we require them to undertake from that period back in June through to February coming. Is the 450, I think, relates predominantly to that, probably the majority of it to do with payments to the company BetterGov to support us. We require extra data migrations to be undertaken, and then we require to look at the results of those to make sure that everything is in place. Just to, I suppose, reassure you, the reason we do not go live with a date that is inappropriate is if we are not ready, particularly with areas such as assessment and charging, we would be billing our clients for social care services incorrectly. So that's why we have a steering group with a whole range of staff and areas represented, and we need to ensure that everybody is comfortable that the system will do what it should do before we go live. Hopefully that answers your question. We do have Sandy Strathern here as well if there is anything that you require more detail on.
On the whole matter of Swift to Mosaic, I don't know if Scott wants to add anything further, but it may be Colin, you yourself want to come in with a follow-up.
Yeah, I think it's so thanks for the timeline. And I understand that these things shift, but I also understand from experience in a prior life that the introduction of new IT projects does give rise to significant disruption and delay and changes in spec and testing and user interfaces and finding out things that don't work. And I understand all of the necessity to validate that all of those systems and get it working properly. I think, therefore, my remaining concern is about the £450,000. If I read 6.6.2, it says it's proposed that £450,000 is applied from the budget to meet the increasing costs on the Mosaic project. If we don't agree that, do we not switch Mosaic on, and therefore are we actually being presented with a choice, or is this a fait accompli that has, that £450,000 has effectively already been agreed in principle, and elected members are now just being caught up on the fact?
Can I come back, Councillor Stewart? Yeah, you will recall at the last monitoring of this committee that we explained that the Microsoft licensing, if I could get my tongue around that, costs that we had in the budget, that the national work on the contract hadn't taken place in time. Therefore, we had a significant underspend in that area. So, in terms of the £450,000, yes, we are making those payments from June, and we will require to continue to make those payments if we want to launch Mosaic in a successful manner. However, there is no additional cost to the budget that you have, but capital budgets that you have already agreed, because the paper is saying that we will use the underspend that was declared in the last monitoring to do with the Microsoft licensing not having been uplifted as planned, and that will be where this £450,000 is funded from. Again, I don't know if Scott Walker wishes to add any clarification to what I've said there.
Yeah. I mean, just to confirm, we did adjust the IT budget in the last report on the back of the Microsoft updates, and that's been applied to cover these additional costs.
Colin?
Yeah, okay, I get that, but okay. So, however, we were adjusting the IT budget because there were savings on the licensing. So that was a saving of nearly £500,000, presumably, on the licensing. But that's a saving which has now disappeared from the capital budget because of the costs going out of control on the Mosaic project, effectively.
Again, if I could come back, Councillor Stewart, I wouldn't say the costs have gone out of control. The costs that we are incurring are not costs from our suppliers to do with changes that they are making. They are costs to do with us as an organisation asking these two companies to do work for us. So they originally anticipated, as the two organisations concerned, that they would be finished at the go-live date that I originally outlined back in June, or at least finished in terms of the implementation and go-live. We have asked them to run extra data migration exercises for us and to do a significant amount of work on testing. That is because if we launched the system as it was back in June, then it wouldn't have been appropriate for assessment and charging, and there would have been significant risk about incorrect billing, as I said. So we as officers and as an organisation have asked them to undertake extra work for us, which we are paying them for.
Okay,
I
thanks.
would also add that SWIFT and subsequently Mosaic are two of the biggest systems that this organisation has, and two of the most important management information systems we have in terms of the impact on our most vulnerable clients. Therefore, we do need to get what we do with the system right in terms of what we know about at the point in which we go live. Obviously, it wouldn't be competent to launch the system to go live when we know there's issues with the results of the testing. So we are undertaking a further data migration in the period now, data migration 8. We will look at the outputs from that data migration, but if the results of the testing are good and there's no further issues thrown up, then we will be content and comfortable that we can get to the 11th of February for a go live date.
Okay, thanks. Last quick one then on this for the moment. What percentage of the overall budget for Mosaic is that? Does that 450 represent, or what's the total overall budget?
It's now £4.3 million is the overall budget.
Thank you.
Okay, it's not impossible. We will return to this matter. Can I just ask myself, Alan, before we move on to other questions, are you now reasonably, and it's user acceptance testing, all these kind of things, to complete and to be absolutely certain on, are you reasonably certain now that we will go live with Mosaic the middle of February?
Right, we have a project board meeting tomorrow, which, as I said earlier, Jackie Pepper chairs. The update from the programme manager and myself will relate to the outstanding issues that I mentioned, one of which is brokerage and relates to work within the partnership. We have a plan for that to be achieved. So if that plan is ratified tomorrow, then in terms of the issues to do with brokerage, they would be resolved and in place. In terms of the issues to do with what was identified in terms of assessment and charging, TAG, the access group, have come up with solutions to those. What I would say is, therefore, if the testing throws up no other issues, I am entirely comfortable that we will be going live in February. However, it is not an iterative process, and when you resolve issues in a system and then you undertake testing, it can identify and throw up new issues. However, I think, again, as I've said, Sandy's on the call, but I think we are both as comfortable as we can be that if there is no further what the companies call showstoppers thrown up by the results of the testing, we will be going live in February.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I think the next meeting of Finance and Resources is on the 5th of February next year, and let's hope it's positive, but even there, it would be helpful to have an update. And if there are any further difficulties, I think the committee most assuredly would want a further update on that. And I can understand some of the difficulties that do apply, but this has gone on for a very long period of time. Now, conscious of other questions, so I'm going to turn now to Councillor Duff. John.
Thank you, Convener. My question is under paragraph 6.3.3, but the table on page 50. And first and foremost, to point out, which I think is probably a typo, on the top of the fourth column on that table, it says year 27-28, which I think probably should be 26-27. But my question specifically is on the last item on that table about cemetery extensions and the plan to defer £220,000 worth of spend to year 26-27, I presume. I'm aware that in a number of cemeteries the capacity is becoming full, and I just wondered if the 2-year delay, presumably 2, not 3, is likely to impact on any cemeteries becoming full without any extension to a cemetery being available. If that information might be available or shared with me after the meeting, if it's not, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. I think this will be Fraser Crofts. Andy Clegg's here. Right, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Hope you can hear me okay. Yes, there has been a delay to that programme. However, we've still got capacity in most cemeteries or nearby alternatives, and we're currently working through the strategy that we'd already approved at committee some time ago in terms of seeking new land. That's quite a complex process, involves a number of physical constraints on the land that we've looked at. And obviously then we've got to get into negotiations with landowners, but we've got a cross-service project team working on it, including our estates and legal colleagues, colleagues from bereavement services and planning, to make sure we're identifying as many sort of sites as we possibly can to go forward on this. As I say, it's unfortunate there's been a delay to the programme, mainly due to sort of sickness, absence and staff resources, but we have got that team up and running now, and we are making progress with it.
Okay, thanks, Andy. John, got happy with that. Right. Okay. I don't see any further questions other than there is a question from Councillor Barrett. Peter.
I was about to say I should have put one in there, convener. Questions with regard to paragraph 622 and the Gary Viaduct. When we agreed to include the Gary Viaduct repairs in the capital programme in March last year, we were advised of the significant corrosion to the metal bearings dating back to when the bridge was originally built in 1969. So are we confident that delaying the project by a year isn't going to create problems with regard to the significant corrosion to those bearings? Have we been able in the interim to ascertain how badly corroded they are and whether it's safe to delay the works by a year, given the kind of significant traffic disruption that there would be to road and rail if the bearings were to fail?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I'm going to go straight to Fraser Crofts. Fraser.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just to provide some a reassurance, the structures team continue to make assessments on the bridge on a regular basis. The scheme has been in the capital budget for some time now. It is proving to be quite a complex undertaking, as I understand it. But as I say, just to give some reassurance that the bridge is being regularly inspected and the timeline that we have there is appropriate in terms of the repair work.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Fraser. Right, I don't see any further questions, so I'm going to move the report and there. On both the capital budget and on the housing investment programme, once again, Scott Walker has given us detailed commentary on the contents of both reports. I think we continue to make good progress with delivery of the capital budget. As applied last time, many of the budget adjustments within this paper are basically aligning resources with actual activity on the ground. And that's something I'm sure will continue to be the case. One update I think is very welcome is that relating to the Glenfarne Community Transport Group. It's featured quite often, I notice, in the Kinross newsletter, and I think it's instructive for other potential or existing community groups. It's also had quite a lot of national attention. I think it is an example of councils working with communities to understand what their needs are and helping them achieve better outcomes for their local areas. So I very much welcome in section 6.3 the purchase of the community transport vehicle that's referred to. The Appendix 4, which is one feature of the capital report, I know a lot of councillors and members of this committee pay attention to. It gives an update on progress. We've referred already to the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, and Councillor McEwen has made comments, and that is progressing very well. It's been long delayed, but it's almost there. It's going to open later this year, and with full completion by Easter of next. On the Destiny Bridge, and in fact is out on the New Bidder Road from the A93 down to Scroon Racecourse just at the weekend, but that remains on track for an opening in spring of next year, and I think could be indeed transformative for transport communications in large parts of certainly Perthshire. The Comrie Flood Scheme is going to be on site from February 25. Indeed, I noticed the other day Balfour Beatty have now got their huts up at the Field of Refuge, and there's still clearance work to be done, but a lot of the main construction work will begin in February. And then Perth High School, which will open in summer 2025 and should be fully completed by summer of 26. I think we're seeing really good progress being made on the delivery, and it is of some 620 million of investment across Perth and Kinross between now and the end of this decade. The other factor to point out is the report also sets out almost £97 million of expenditure on the housing investment programme over the next 5 years, and that includes an update on our council house buyback programme. What we're going to see is by the end of this year, and ahead of projections, some 92 houses will be back under council ownership and management and available to help towards our housing emergency. Once again, as always, I want to place on record my thanks to council officers for their really immense efforts to ensure delivery of this capital programme during what are really very difficult times and constraining times in terms of budgetary pressures. I'd like to move the paper. Thank you.
Happy to formally second.
We now move to, if I can just get here, any comments? Right, and I will agree to the request for, a comfort break from Councillor Cuthbert after we've completed the comment section on this paper. Could I take, first of all, Councillor Rebick? John.
Thanks very much, Convener. I'll be very brief, given Councillor Cuthbert's pressure of nature, but I just, and other colleagues, I suspect. However, to be serious for a minute, I would just like to welcome, there's a little bit more expenditure on Pooler Terrace, rather parochially, I know, but it is worth mentioning. It's welcome. We do have dangerous steps, we do have dangerous pathways there. There's been a lot of good work done on Pooler Terrace, and it's welcome. I think there's been a couple of officers locally who have really persevered with it, and I want to thank them. They know who they are, but also to thank residents for their patience. It's been many, many years that this project has taken to come about, as Claire will know. But we're getting there. The work is really good, and it's appreciated. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there, and it's worthwhile thanking officers involved in this and residents for their patience. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And now on to Councillor McEwen. Tom.
Thank you very much, Convener. You mentioned in your own remarks regarding the new build programme, our 5-year strategic housing investment plan has a moving target. It's always got projects that push and pull into the dates, and this report here reflects the movement and the monies that are needed for the movement of different projects to different years, and that's all down to the hard work of the housing team and the planning team to ensure that we have a continued supply of new houses as best we can within the circumstances that we have to work in. You also mentioned the buybacks, and I think this is one of the great successes this year of the housing team led by Elaine Ritchie. And I think that it demonstrates that even when other pressures are on and maybe we're not building as many new houses this year as we have in the past, that there are other avenues and other options that they will go down to try and ensure that we maximise the number of affordable and social houses that we have for rent in Perth and Kinross. In my questioning, I mentioned Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. I'd like to, at this point, congratulate Stephen Crawford and his team. There's been an amazing project, a unique project in the passive house development that, don't I say passive house development, it's not that, was it? Yeah, it's passive house. For the Blair project, which was a new way of working for him and his team and for the builders, and I think they've done an amazing job there, and I'm sure the people of East Perthshire will be looking forward to the new facility come the new year. And I think my youngest daughter is glad that they're not going to interrupt her prelims with opening it prior to that. You also mentioned, and what I would also say that project is just come forward on time, on budget, possibly a little bit under budget, we don't know yet. It was completed before the Cromley flood scheme. So probably, Kavina, you're still going to have to go on about your flood scheme. When it's come January, I can stop talking about Blairgowrie Rec Centre because it'll be there. Thank you. Well, and you also mentioned there's a housing emergency. There's a national housing emergency in Scotland, but there's not a housing emergency in Perth and Kinross because of the hard work of our team.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. And yes, I probably have at times gone on rather a lot about Comrie flood scheme, but understandably, and we're getting there, and you've got there and colleagues on the Blairgowrie Rec. Right, I'm now we're going to be a bit more 90 minutes, but there are a few people wanting to make comments. But Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, two things. Basically, I'm really pleased to see the Glenfarg Community Transport deal going through. Just to sort of give a bit of background, that it's more expensive to lease a bus than it is to acquire a bus, and the cost of acquiring it is basically taken out of the amount we're going to be paying for that transport. So my view is that it's maybe a model that we can roll out to other areas, and it's something that we can look at and see how it works. My second comment really is addressed to Councillor Rebeck here next to me. The comfort break was requested. I had sciatica in the last term that I served as a councillor, and that is, there's a lot of evidence to say it's because you sit for too long and you don't get exercise. And my view is that any meeting that lasts for more than 90 minutes should have a break, and that's why I called for the recess. Thank you.
No, that's fine. And I'd also just say to you on the Glenfarg transport bus, there's also benefit, not just to Glenfarg, people going to Perth, but also, by the way, for people in Bridge of Arn, and it's been a significant benefit to them. Right, I'm now going to move to Councillor Shires. Caroline?
Thank you, Convener. Just to echo Councillor McEwen's comments about the Blairgowrie Rec, Stephen Crawford and his team have been absolutely excellent, very responsive to the many queries that have come in from the local community, adapted some of the elements such as fences, etc., to accommodate that. And, you know, in a massive build like that on a very tight site, while the school is still operating and the recreation centre, the current recreation centre is still operating, lots of challenges, but they met them all, and I'm very grateful on behalf of the local community. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Next is Deputy, and second last, I think, is Deputy Provost Parrott. Andrew.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cuthbert is essentially still in the comment I was going to make about the Glenfarg community bus offer that we're making and the purchase of the vehicle. I'd just add the hope that, if you like, this is the first of a number of such schemes that we might develop across the county that will provide benefit in the future for provision of public transport in the more rural areas of the authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Barrett, and I see Councillor Drysdale also wishes to make a comment after Councillor Barrett. Peter?
Thanks, Stuart. Tommy and I frequently agree in this chamber. However, his final comments, I think, as he is occasionally wont to, he's gone off script. And I think if Tommy thinks that there isn't a housing emergency in Perth and Kinross, then he is sincerely mistaken. The Scottish Parliament has recognised that there's a housing emergency across the whole country, and we haven't eluded that in Perth and Kinross, despite the best efforts and the strong commitments of our officers. We're still having to deal with the reduced affordable housing supply programme budget and the £200 million cut that the Scottish Government has made to that. And if they don't reinstate that in their budget next month, then there will be a 25% reduction in our new build programme. And that's going to be a big hole to fill. And it won't be filled by an expanded buyback programme, which, remember, doesn't bring new houses into supply. It just changes the tenure. So there is a housing emergency in Perth and Kinross. We have homeless presentations increasing on what they were last year. We've got durations in temporary accommodation increasing on what they are last year. And as I said, that is no criticism of the officers who are responding to what they describe as a housing crisis. And I don't think we need to be splitting hairs and semantics on the difference between a crisis and an emergency, but we certainly don't need to deny that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and put all our political will and effort behind addressing that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And last comment is from Councillor Drysdale. Eric, you're online.
Thank you. Yeah, just to conclude, I think with if this is the final comment, the appendix, appendix 4 has an update on the significant capital projects progress update. It lists Blairgowrie Rec that we've heard about, Riverside Primary School, which is complete, Perth High School, which is on course and on course to complete next summer, to complete in the summer, open in the summer of 2025. Harris Academy, Invergowrie Extension, the Cymru Flood Protection Scheme, the Perth Museum. These are all projects that are on track, and obviously the biggest of them all is the Cross Tay Link Road, which is also on track for completion at the end of March. And I think, you know, I would just like to say that these infrastructure projects are all complicated. They all have their own challenges, made more challenging by the economic situation and by all the factors we know about construction inflation and COVID, etc., the war in Ukraine. Is a testament to all officers involved in these projects and those on the front line actually doing the building, and everybody in between. They should all be congratulated for maintaining a very high reputation for this council in delivering capital projects for the benefit of the people of Perth and Kinross. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale, and I agree entirely with your sentiments, Eric, and I think we are making good progress. And often infrastructure projects can be, you know, just the complexity can create problems, can create difficulties, but I think we are indeed making good progress in that respect. Right, I'm now going to ask members of the committee to both note the contents of the report and approve the proposed adjustments to the composite capital budget and approve the proposed adjustments to the housing investment programme. Are we agreed? Okay, we're going to have a recess we reconvene, and we now move on to item 7 on the agenda, the Treasury Activity and Compliance Report. And again, I'm going to ask Scott Walker to speak to the paper, but I know John Jennings will also be available online. And this comes on a day when some of you may have noticed the latest, the paper is up to 30th September in most places, slightly beyond that. And you may have noticed today that the latest inflation figures were announced with an increase to 2.3%. But that aside, I'm going to move to Scott. Scott.
Thank you, Convener. In line with the previous decision of the committee, this is a 6-month update covering the period 1st of April 24 through to 30 September 24. Section 4 provides some wider economic context, including information on the recent announcement on interest rates. Section 5 focuses on Treasury activity over the last 6 months. During that period, we undertook one new 3-year loan for £20 million from another local authority and repaid 2 PWLB loans totalling £5.5 million. This meant that our long-term debt increased by £14.5 million in the period to £628.2 million at an average interest rate of 2.64%. We also took out 2 short-term market loans for £5 million each to manage daily cash flows. We made 20 fixed-rate deposits during the 6 months, totaling £97 million at an average amount of £4.85 million and an average interest rate of 5.27%. During the 6 months, through our proactive approach to treasury management, we generated over £890,000 in interest from fixed-term deposits at their maturity, and a further £427,000 from money market funds and instant access accounts. All investments were made in accordance with the approved investment strategy and permitted investments, and were also consistent with our cash flow requirements. In Section 6, I provide confirmation that during the period there were no breaches in compliance with the approved Treasury Management Policy Statement. In Section 7, I provide an update on our investments and confirm that the investment strategy was applied in full during the period. And in Section 8, I confirm that the Council adhered to all prudential limits for the 6-month reporting period. Convener, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have any questions? Right, there being none, I shall move the report. As you can see, this Treasury update, and it is important that we know the structure of our finances, both of our loans, maturity of our debts, and also of the structure of our investments. But it covers a period from the 1st of April 2024 through to 30 September this year. I think he's given us a very good summary of the contents of the report. It gives also, as usual, a commentary on the wider economy, as well as a summary of our own Treasury activity. And I think that broader economic perspective is actually quite helpful, especially as we're about to move into the budget process and budget review process. I certainly welcome confirmation in the report that, 1, there are no breaches in compliance with our Treasury Management Policy. Secondly, the investment strategy was applied in full throughout the period, and that our prudential limits were adhered to. I'd like to move the report.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, it's unfortunate that we take it for granted, but we can only take these reports for granted about compliance because the respect and trust built up over our finance team over many years of hard work, and it's no surprise for us, and it's that is the reason why there are no questions on the report. Thanks. Happy to second.
Thank you. Do we have any comments? Councillor Parrott, Deputy Provost Parrott.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. I think we have a fantastic team who manage our money, and to me, without going into the detailed mathematics, the fact that our average interest rate on our borrowing is still only 2.6.8% against the prevailing norms at the moment is testament to the fantastic work that our team have done in the past and continue to do. And I think we should note that. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And Councillor Duff. John.
Thanks, Convener. It's really just to echo the comments of Deputy Provost Barrett. I think the statement that's there at paragraph 5.3 about existing average interest rate is testament to the hard work of our officers in years gone past, which is standing us in good stead even now in the current challenges. And I'd just like to thank the officers for the 3 reports we've had so far at today's meeting, because I think it shows you how well our finance team serves this council. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, can we I just say I agree with Andrew and I agree with John, and absolutely right. And I think it reflects really a very effective financial team. Can we agree the report? Right, I'm now going to hand over to Vice Convener and Council Leader Grant Lang. Before I do so, there's something I didn't do earlier, and it's just out of courtesy, is to welcome Baillie Claire McLaren to the committee, because this is her first time on the committee. I know she's probably going to be asking 1 or 2 things about the Drummond Arms, but I'm now going to hand over to Grant.
Thank you. Without further ado, I'll just ask David Littlejohn, who has moved into the correct position, to introduce this report, which obviously brings no joy to anyone, but I'll ask David to speak to it.
No, indeed, not a report that any of us would want to bring to committee. Architecturally and historically, the former Drummond Arms Hotel is an important building, and considerable effort has been made over the past 10 years or so to save it, culminating by its acquisition by the Crieff Community Development Trust through a special purpose vehicle in 2019. However, the overriding consideration is public safety, and the Drummond Arms is no longer safe. Although there is no immediate danger of collapse, the building's deterioration is such that it is an inevitability. The most recent report, supported by a drone survey, concludes that the roof is largely beyond repair, and its collapse may impact on the structural integrity of the building. At a meeting with the Darrell directors and project manager on 18th of October, they made it clear they had exhausted all options to secure an economically viable reuse of the building. Based on the evidence presented, they were then advised that in the interest of public safety, the issue of the failing roof structure would have to be addressed. However, Darrell indicated they have no financial means of undertaking any further safety works to the building, and indeed their intention is to place the company into voluntary liquidation. The building at that point would become ownerless, with no one taking responsibility for public safety. The council would then inevitably need to step in at that time, but potentially in an emergency situation leading to road closure for a lengthy period. It's my advice that the council should intervene now to ensure a managed response and to minimise risk. And meantime, as we approach winter, the serving a dangerous building notice on Darrell will allow immediate action to be taken by the council if it becomes necessary to protect the public. The paper presented today seeks authority for the council as an absolute last resort to take ownership of the building and address the safety issues, which at a minimum would require the removal of the roof, the chimneys and some dormer windows. The report summarises the history of the project, the funding agreed by both the Council and the Scottish Government to support the building's reuse, and at Appendix 2 the expenditure made. Paragraph 4.7 summarises the information passed to the Council on estimated costs. Clearly these will require checking and validated through procurement. However, the key issue will remain unchanged. There is no longer any prospect of the building being taken on by a developer and economically reused. Therefore, full demolition is recommended, thereby removing the public safety risk entirely and at least allowing the site to be redeveloped for wider community benefit.
Thank you, David Littlejohn. I see there are a few questions here. I'll start with Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, on page 89 under paragraph 4.4, when I add up these sums of money, it comes to 1.187 million. And the report further down on page 125 says that it details the spending of 1,062,000. So my question is, what happened to the other 125,000, which hasn't been detailed in the explanation further down?
David?
I can't do instant arithmetic, but obviously the figure of the tables, I think, relate to the expenditure at a time when the table was written. I think that the figures in the report will be the accurate report. But I can double check the figures and provide an accurate breakdown that totals up the various grants awarded by various bodies over the years.
If you could possibly send it to all the councillors on this committee, just so we get clarity.
Alison, if you wish to add to that, please.
Just to clarify, thanks for the question. The difference is grant that was awarded but wasn't claimed by the project. So not all the grant awarded was claimed for both the town centre and the PBIB. I think it was from the PBIB element. There was a small amount that wasn't claimed at the end of the day. So the funding on the table is actually the grant payments made, the 897,444 for town centre place-based investment on Appendix 2. That total amount, the £1,062,894 were the payments made, not to the grant awarded, because that's where the difference will be. There'll be some monies that were awarded but weren't claimed at the end of the day. A small amount in the total amount, but that'll be the difference.
So can that money be claimed and then used to help offset some of the costs that we might incur?
No, because Alison. It was unfortunately not. This is historic money that we were given by Scottish Government, so this money has now gone in a sense, so we can't reclaim it from Scottish Government, or any underspend was actually reallocated to other projects, but not in this case. There is no money left in the pot.
Okay, thank you. You've got two further questions. Are they conjoined to on the same theme? Okay, so Councillor Duff, John.
I had a similar question, and maybe it has been answered, but presumably there is no funds left with the Drummond Arms Regeneration Limited that can also be transferred to the council within this arrangement.
My understanding, and I'll get clarity if I'm incorrect, is that they have enough funds to continue till at the end of the financial year, and then that will be they'll have no funding left, and that's what the proposal is, that we will take over the building at that time, but David will know more of the fact.
Yeah, as I understand it, they had a small amount of cash left that covered the cost of the latest update to the engineers report, which they received at the end of September, and the drone survey. Beyond that, it's down to minimal amounts of money, which would result in them trading insolvently, which you clearly can't do, and therefore putting the company into voluntary liquidation is their only in the recourse. So in short answer, no, there is no cash available that could be transferred back into the council.
Yes, thanks. Dave, your second question?
Thank you. Yeah, I understand that Scrutiny this morning agreed they would do a review on this particular property, but I'm curious, when you've got an old building, the first thing you do when you're making it safe is to make it wind and watertight. And that just doesn't seem to have happened here. I get the impression they went in and removed asbestos without fixing the roof, which to me seems very odd. I'm just wondering, how much involvement did officers have and what input did they have into the decisions made by the Darrell group?
That probably is more of a question that could be answered when we come to do a learning review of how we support many community projects. But actually, officers were involved from the moment the committee took the decision to allocate the funding to the project on the basis of the information that was received at the time. They've actually visited the building. The intention was only to do the necessary works in order to keep the building safe, in order to encourage a private sector developer. So they did some stripping out. There were some things that were kind of rotting, and that was all taken out so that the rot wouldn't further spread effectively. So that was the bulk of the cost at that time. The roof was in large part okay at that time, apart from, I think, the part above the Royal Bank part of the building. Over the last 5 years, with no maintenance whatsoever and no additional cash. Remember, the bulk of this money was spent in 2019, 2020, 2021. That's the deterioration. But it's a reasonable question to ask, and I think that's something we could review in more detail during the course of any future kind of review of how we support communities to take forward the project. But remember, they make claims against criteria, and we awarded the grant against that criteria and checked that it was being spent on the purpose that they claimed for. They had a project manager, of course, on site throughout the duration as well.
If it's a follow-up, yeah.
It's a follow-up, yeah. Just to say, I think, I mean, obviously, if Scrutiny are doing a review on this, there'll be more detail and more depth gone into. But I'm, as far as I can see, the money was spent in 2021-22, which is only a couple of years ago. And I can't quite understand how the roof is now a danger of collapsing, and we've issued a dangerous building notice because it is in danger of collapsing because of the roof. So I don't quite understand how it can have deteriorated so quickly from where it was at previously. But as I say, that's probably for a Scrutiny. And I would ask that Scrutiny does go into that sort of detail.
Oh, I think it will. With the man sitting next to you, we'll be wanting to look at all aspects. John?
Thank you. My question's regarding some of the information that's in paragraph 4.7 about the facade retention, and note a slightly higher cost in relation to demolition if we were to retain the facade. And just wondered if there might be benefits to that, and whether we would be able to apply for any kind of heritage money in order to help to retain the facade. Thank you.
David?
The challenge that we have of doing that is that the last piece of work to be done by the roofing engineer in the spring of this year concluded that the roof is now beyond repair and is deteriorating quite rapidly now because there are holes that have emerged in the roof since the 2022 structural engineers report. So we're requiring the roof to be made safe, which to all intents and purposes means removing the roof. If you remove the roof there's a sense, and some of the roof is actually being supported by the scaffolding, and the scaffolding is not structural scaffolding, so it's fulfilling a function that it isn't designed to do. So if the roof is taken off, you're then left with the facade of the building, but there's still no identifiable economic reuse for that building. So you would be propping up and maintaining the facade for a very long period of time. It would need to be kind of, I'm looking at Stephen, but it needs steels erected in the interior to support that facade in a permanent or a semi-permanent fashion, and that is significantly more additional cost and ongoing maintenance costs. But Stephen can maybe give you more of the detail on that option.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm not a structural engineer, but retaining the facade effectively means probably to have a whole steel frame behind the facade. So you are creating a structure for the building. You're not going to want any sort of structural steel at the front of the building because that'll impact the trunk road. So I think the recommendation to do full demolition is certainly one that I would encourage, and the recommendation in the report is for affordable housing, and if you retain the facade, you're retaining effectively the same floor to ceiling heights, which are very high, and effectively it's an uneconomic or it's more difficult to heat that when you've got high floor to ceiling heights. So hence, from a technical perspective, my perspective is a full demolition.
Thanks. Sorry, David, I didn't see your first question.
That's
before.
okay. That's okay. No problem. Can I start by commenting on how well the report is written? It's very clear and concise and explains the situation very well. So thank you for that. Couple of questions about from Appendix 2, summary of spend. First of all, the purchase of the former RBS building at £90,000. That seems quite a lot for a derelict building. Is that a valid comment to make?
David? The building was in two ownerships, and part of the challenge was, it was impossible to develop the one part of the building without having the other. And I think the owner of that second part of the building was holding out for a significant amount of money. And I think remember the trust acquired this in 2019, but there were years of work in advance of that to try and put the deal together. So the price they paid was the price that they could get the former Royal Bank building from its owner. The owner wasn't the Royal Bank; it's a private individual.
And
sorry, I got another wee question on the cost. They mentioned £230,000 for scaffolding. Does Darrell own the scaffolding, or is that just rented?
It was initially rented, and then when it was appreciated this was going to be a much longer term project than they ever imagined it would be, they bought it because that was a more cost effective option than continued to rent it. So it's now owned by Darrell. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And Dave, your last question.
Probably.
You've put it down in print.
My question is, I think the history behind this, there was a whole lot of community involvement and interest in seeing the site developed. And I think because it's a key part of the streetscape and it's right in the centre of Crieff, I'm curious, would it be feasible for officers to consider some sort of mixed use? So once it's demolished and we're rebuilding, we actually look at shop frontages at the bottom half and then residential above or something similar. So I just wondered if that was going to be feasible given the decision of council previously.
We have been taking a decision at council that the first thing we'll look at is affordable housing on surplus land. We will end up paying over £3 million or up to £3 million to get a site of public money, and we'll have to see what comes out of it. But if we're developing it, it should be developed for affordable housing. or if we go for mixed tenure, which might be something that has to be for housing.
Yeah, I mean, the size of the site and its location would lend itself to housing, but it'll be affordable housing of some type. It could be mid-market, could be some social housing. It's unlikely, given the location, because it's on a busy trunk road, that the ground floor would be attractive as a residential accommodation. So I think we would need to look at some kind of commercial use. I wouldn't necessarily jump to retail. There are a number of other issues with retail in Crieff, but potentially some commercial use or business space or something on the ground floor would seem to be appropriate. But we're a long way away from that, and a development appraisal needs to be undertaken, and some real discussions about the massing, the size, the materials. All of that is for the future.
Councillor Anderson.
It's a quick one. I just wonder how much money has the council granted or loaned to the developers or the hopeful developers of the hotel over the years? I remember that hotel having meetings in it many, many years ago, and it was in reasonable order then. I'm talking about 20, 25 years ago. This seems to go on. How much money has the council put in loans or grants to developers?
David will add to it. I think we maybe put money in towards the scaffolding through a council decision, but the money came from the Scottish Government through the Town Regeneration Fund, which we were responsible as a local authority for dispersing to projects that were scored, if my memory is correctly. And that, I'm sure, was up to about in 2 tranches, because it was money allocated to Pitlochry, but nothing came forward for Pitlochry. So I think it's about 900,000 or up to $1 million that came through PKC, through the hands of PKC from the Scottish Government. But David will know the figures better than I do.
So the table that's on page 125 sets out the breakdown of grants that have been offered to Drummond Arms Regeneration Limited. Alison can correct me if I'm wrong, but the only fund that came from council resource is the £5,000 from the vacant property fund. So that was feasibility money. Everything else has been through either Scottish Government or well, actually Scottish Government by various routes and various funds over the years. Open for Business Fund as well, for 15,000, I think, from the council in total. Yeah.
Okay, John.
I'm happy to defer to Councillor Stewart for his first question.
Sorry, I thought Councillor Stewart already had a question. Colin.
It just seemed like it. Thank you, convener. We have the narrow, they're called narrow report, NARA structural report. What we don't have is the CDA report supported by CBRE. Can somebody, I do not understand this whenever it happens. Can somebody explain to me how demolishing a building costs £3 million?
I mean, Stephen will say far more than I can, but fundamentally, it's the scale, the location, it's the difficulty of a building in that location, it's the height, it's the complexity of the roof structure, it's partly on a hill, and it through one of the more recent surveys, they discovered there were pockets of asbestos that couldn't be removed when the building was stripped out. A lot of the money went to take asbestos out. There are pockets of asbestos in the roof structures, which I think the drone survey picked up, and that will have to be removed first prior to the roof coming off. I think all of that adds to the cost. I can't say it is 3 million at this stage. That's based on estimates, but Stephen can say a wee bit more.
Demolition is a very complicated project. As the employer in the demolition, we have the duty for the health and safety of both the environment in Crieff, but also making sure we've got a competent contractor, that all the staff are then trained and there's a safe method statement to take this down. This will take months to demolish this building. And given the condition, given the advice in that report, the first thing we will have to do is actually design the demolition process to take it down safely. And it may be hand bit by bit by bit. If I can, I recall the project we did at St Paul's when we purchased St Paul's with a dangerous building notice, and it took us 6 months to get to the middle of the building in a safe way, protecting the staff at each time. And the initial works there cost nearly £500,000 there to get to securing the building, make it a safe environment, to then think about redevelopment. So this one, having walked around the building a number of times, and just round the building, and certainly seen the David Narrow report, will be appointing a design team to then come up with a design and a safe method of demolishing the building. It's certainly not a demolition in the old school of stand back and let it fall down. This is a pick it down, lift it down. All of the material will then have to go to landfill. So there's a lot of haulage costs within that, and the building and the costs just add up.
Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Duff, John.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Yeah, I want to go back to Mr. Sorry. To the answer to Councillor Illingworth's comment about the ownership of the scaffolding, and the answer there that Mr. Littlejohn gave. Presumably then, in terms of transferring the ownership of the hotel to the council, we will also want to ask for transfer of the ownership of the scaffolding in order to ensure that we're not getting charged by the liquidators for rental or whatever of these items. Thanks.
Yeah, all of the assets of Darrell, which includes the scaffolding, would transfer to the council if the committee is minded to approve the recommendation. So the scaffolding does have some value technically, but part of it is inadvertently, it's not designed to do it, but it's holding up part of the roof structure, so you can't kind of remove the scaffolding and deal with that. So the thing will have to be dealt with together, and we need to put it into the hands of, as Stephen was saying, that's why a process has to be safely designed and then executed, and that will include the scaffolding, but it will come to the council as well.
Councillor Revick.
So just a little bit follow up on that, if I might, Vice Convener.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that everything from Darrell transfers to the council, are there any other liabilities then that might come with that other than the demolition?
We'll need to do due diligence, but as we understand it, Darrell would move into voluntary liquidation, which would mean there's no creditors involved, but clearly we would have to do all of that due diligence. But what we are expecting to get is reluctantly, we're going to get the building and the scaffolding is essentially what we would get, and copies of all plans, drawings, reports, surveys, so that we've got the full pack of information.
Thanks, Councillor Revick. John.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just a quickie, where we are in terms of the building does seem to be a bit of a cloud, but the silver lining could be the fact that we have much needed social housing of some kind. How definitively wed are we to that being the use of the building once it's demolished? I hope that we are pretty definitively wed to
that. I think it states in the report, but there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before we get to that situation, and I think we're trying to deal with what we don't want to have to deal with, but we have to, for it falls on our shoulders as a local authority to do this, and it's not it's always going to be an inopportune time, but with the stress in our budgets, it's even more inopportune it's come at this time.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Councillor Barrett. Peter.
Thanks. couple of questions. The first is with regard to paragraph 4.4 and reference to report 21-149, which reported that Darrell was progressing well, and I think that they could have made use of even more money being awarded to them at the time. So sometime between 2021 and now, things stopped going or stopped progressing well. So when did we first get to hear that things were going off track? And did we miss opportunities to intervene at an earlier stage where demolition might not have been the only option open to us? And the second question kind of goes back to Councillor Duff's point. There's a lot of rumours going on about what's happening with the Drummond Arms and what hasn't, and how competent or otherwise the directors of the Darrell were. The latest being that the scaffolding, there's an agreement in place that the original company that erected it have got an option to take it down and take it back, and that if the scaffolding transfers to the council, they'll remove it. And do we need legal protections to prevent that happening?
David?
So in relation to the first question, we don't have all the answers yet. I mean, I was alerted to the issue when the directors asked to have a meeting about the building. So that would probably have been September time. That meeting took place in October. We haven't been closely monitoring the project over the COVID years because nothing was happening, and it's a combination of the pandemic, everything else that's going on around the pandemic, and construction inflation that has finally, as I understand it, tipped the project over the edge. I think up until the pandemic, there was still some interest. One of the developers of the Hill School Hill Street School in Blairgowrie was interested, a specialist conservation house developer. The owners of Crieff Hydro took a look at it to see if it could possibly work as a hotel. So there was some serious interest in the building up until probably about the pandemic time, and then I think from then on things have started to slip to the point where there is now no viable use of the building, and it has, because they've spent no money on it since the last of the large grants were offered, has deteriorated, and we'll need to look into did it deteriorate that quickly? Was it always deteriorating? Buildings do deteriorate very quickly when they're not being maintained. So I wouldn't suggest that it may well have just happened in the past couple of years. But that's the kind of stuff we need to look at in terms of how we work with these types of projects in the future. In relation to the scaffolding, that I've seen quite a few emails about that. The scaffolding is owned by Darrell, and the owners. There was some kind of deal where they could either pay one more small sum of money and then keep it forever, or not return it. I think I need to check the kind of facts of it, or the owner could come and take it away if they didn't need it. So they got a slightly reduced price because of that deal, but there's no contract in place to that effect. So that was a kind of choice. If they didn't need the scaffolding, the people that supplied it would take it back for a small fee. But that's where we're at, is they own the scaffolding. The scaffolding is inextricably linked to the building and needs to stay with the building until the building is demolished.
Councillor Stewart.
Two, I think, on different topics. Maybe just following up on the one of Councillor Cuthbert's questions and the first part of Councillor Barrett's last question. In terms of going in and doing asbestos work versus making the roof safe in the first place. I mean, the report mentions in several places, and the letter to Councillor Lang at the end mentions the engagement that Darrell has had with officers over the time period. Also given the 800 odd thousand, how much was it? 900,000 from the town centre fund and the place-based investment programme, we would have had a duty to make sure that that money, you know, to do monitoring of that spend, I would have assumed. And there must have been spend happening. I think you said a lot of it happened at the start. Councillor Cuthbert was talking about spend happening in 21, 22, once the sort of peak of COVID had passed. So what were we doing to monitor the spend that we missed the fact that the roof wasn't safe?
Well, we wouldn't have known about the safety of the roof or any other part of the structure because we're not surveyors, and you couldn't go up to the roof to look at it, which is why the drone survey was ultimately done. They applied for funds through a regeneration fund, grant through a regeneration fund, to do necessary works to make the building more attractive for a future investor by stripping out a lot of the rot. And that's what they got the cash for, and that's what we monitored. So they did what they were funded to do. But I'm conscious. I'm very keen that we have this conversation when we get to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee, because I think what's playing in my mind at the moment is the safety of the building. I urge us to kind of focus back on the safety, but I think these are all absolutely legitimate questions to answer at the right time.
Thanks. And Thomas would like to come in, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Yeah, I think it's important that, as David has indicated a couple of times, that we do this properly. And Councillor Stewart's, there was an inherent assumption in what he just said that officers missed something. I don't think there's any suggestion at this stage that officers have missed anything. I think what we are keen to do as officers is to ensure that there is a full review of where this project was initiated from, where it was driven from, where the funding has been allocated and how that has been monitored. All of that, I think, are appropriate, but it does feel that we're in danger of A, making some assumptions at this point in time, and B, beginning that review process when, as David, I think, has urged, the key priority for us just now as officers is to address the public safety matter, notwithstanding that comes at a significant potential cost to council. Thank you.
Thanks. And Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. And just to clarify that it wasn't an assumption that officers might have missed something. It was just to understand the extent of that monitoring that has to happen in terms of following the public pound and so on. So my last question then is just where's next?
So if committee is minded to accept the recommendation, then yes, the next stage is to begin the process, as Stephen said, which is going to take a bit of time. Unless there is an emergency, we would want to go through proper process to get us to the point of applying for listed building consent to demolish, building warrant to take forward the demolition safely, which is approving the method statement, etc. And then there's a process that will be passed to Stephen's team effectively, which will be looking at the cost, the procurement of a demolition contractor. All of that will take time, so it will be into the spring and early summer, I suspect, before we're at that stage, but Stephen will have more detail on that.
The advice from the engineers in the report is that we should start work in January and by June, based on the condition, to have materially improved the situation, if not completed the work.
Yeah, just to clarify, I was asking where's next. So you've talked about St Paul's. We're now talking about the Drummond Arms. We've had the situation with the Clach, and I think maybe the property on is it East Bridge Street or Lochie Bridge? up from the post office, the old post office in Bridgend. What are we doing to? And I know that obviously we'll look at this anyway in terms of review, but what are we doing to make sure that we're ahead of the game in terms of looking at dangerous buildings and making sure that the council isn't on the hook for another the next one down the road?
There's several answers to that. So we know how many buildings across Perth and Kinross are on the buildings at risk register. So there's well over 100, 135, 140 buildings are on the buildings at risk register. We also know how many dangerous buildings notices are currently live, and that's about 30 odd. So we know that there are 30-ish buildings that we believe need some work done to them to make them safe. But that work does not necessarily mean demolition. It could be as much as putting Harris fencing around the site to keep people out of it. So the Drummond Arms, I'm confident in saying, is the extreme example of it because of its location. Had it been somewhere else, we might not have been having this conversation because the responsibility would have been with the owners, and we could have taken the view that they would let it fall down safely by securing the site. That just can't happen because of its location. So we do monitor, and building standards officers do monitor, and we do follow through and monitor dangerous buildings notices to make sure they're being complied with. The ideal situation is to deal with buildings while they're defective but not dangerous, and that's an ongoing process, and then that will rely on elected members, we rely on the public, we rely on a whole range of bodies to advise us. We have a working group in the council, and it also includes the Perth and Kinross Heritage Trust, which is the kind of vacant and eyesore properties group, and that kind of scans the environment and looks at properties that we can take action on before they get to that state, and that's included trying to secure ownership in some cases. A property in Scone, for example, that was ownerless, that we've effectively purchased and will resell. So that group is monitoring the situation as much as we can. So I'm pretty confident there are no other buildings like the Drummond Arms out there. But as I said, we monitor the situation regularly, and the idea is to step in while buildings are defective, using a combination of carrot and stick, if you like, before they become dangerous.
Thanks, David. I'll go to Councillor Duff for the final question.
Thank you. Just in relation to your previous answer there, Mr. John, you raised a question in my mind about the fact that it is listed and whether or not there's any likelihood at all of us not being allowed to demolish the facade or whatever. Thank you.
I think the evidence is pretty strong in terms of the historic environments policy. We've satisfied the tests have been satisfied, which is the building is beyond economic repair, and that's the principal test. I don't think Historic Environment Scotland would be suggesting anything other than that. It's not ideal, and it's not what any of us want to do with a building like that. But I think it is. We're at a point where there is a kind of reality check about its economic reuse. So I'm satisfied that we will secure listed building consent to demolish.
Okay, thanks. There'll be no further questions at this stage. I'm going to move the report. We have heard from David Littlejohn, and we've heard him explain why the council needs to step in to take ownership of the former Drummond Arms Hotel in Crieff. This is an action of last resort. It can only be justified given the real risk to public safety had the building become ownerless following the voluntary liquidation of Drummond Arms Regeneration Limited. This hotel was sold for £1.1 million in 2004, sold again for £325,000 in 2008, and finally for £30,000 in 2019 when it was acquired by Darrell. Over the last 20 years, its condition has deteriorated progressively to the point where a dangerous buildings notice had to be served on the 29th of October, requiring the roof and chimneys to be made safe. The most recent structural engineers report states that the roof timbers are now beyond repair and removal of the entire roof structure is the only option to ensure public safety. I've no doubt that Crieff Community Development Trust was well intentioned in its desire to save and repurpose this prominent listed building. However, as time marched on and economic conditions changed, it became clear that there was no economically viable reuse. The only consideration today is public safety. The Council has a statutory duty under Section 29 of the Building Scotland Act 2003, which states a local authority must carry out work, including, if necessary, demolition for the protection of the public and people or property adjacent to the dangerous building. In normal circumstances, the cost of this work could be recovered from the owner. Darrell has no access to any financial resources of the scale required. £1 million of grant funding has been awarded to Darrell since 2019, and so going forward we need to challenge both our thinking and the robustness of our processes and procedures for supporting community asset transfer of public sector property and enabling the purchase of privately owned buildings by community groups. It's important not just for officers, but members, elected members, have to learn from projects that have gone well and those that have not. We, elected members of this council, passed the grant funding allocation to Darrell for this project. Therefore, I move the paper for approval with the addition of an instruction to officers to prepare a report on community ownership of vacant or derelict buildings for consideration by a future scrutiny and performance committee. I had spoken to the convener of scrutiny and performance prior to his meeting this morning, and asked if he would inquire that if his committee would be willing to take this on as a scrutiny role on this subject, and I'm glad that that whole scrutiny performance committee agreed. So therefore I move the paper with that addition. Thank you.
I wish to second the paper. Can I just say, I think it's a very sad day indeed, and I think for many people in Crieff, they will be very upset at this development. But there is, I believe now, no alternative. On a personal note, I moved with my parents when I was young, very young, to Crieff, and we stayed in the old bank house opposite the town hall. And for something like 9 to 10 years, every day, just about, I looked down from the living room or my bedroom to the Drummond Arms. And the Drummond Arms is just such a key part of the townscape of Crieff, and has been for 150 years, because it was built back in, completed in 1874. But it's more than that. It's also very much part of the social fabric of the town, for receptions, for weddings, for events, for celebrations. And so it is deeply sad. It's deeply tragic what has happened, to see its decline. But there is, without any doubt, the real threat to public safety, and that's got to be first and foremost. Going forward, there will, I think, be considerable discussion, especially given the building's really prominent location within Crieff and Olmsted at the heart of Strathearn. But there's also going forward, we're going to have to be, I think, quite clinical, quite forensic on what has happened and how it's come to this position. That's obviously going to go through scrutiny. There's various factors involved. I'd also argue, and indeed if you go into Google Street View, you will see from 2009 the Royal Bank of Scotland building was still open. The Drummond Arms had not long been closed. And in terms of legislation, whether there is a need for that to be tightened up so that owners of vacant buildings who just do nothing with those buildings, and this is not just an issue here in Crieff and in Perthshire, but throughout the whole of Scotland. I think the Station Hotel in Ayr is one perhaps example where there is a need for much tougher legislation to be able to intervene. But nonetheless, I do second this report, but I do so with considerable sadness. Thank you.
So we'll move on and open up for comments. And very early on in was Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm probably going to say a lot about repeats Councillor Donaldson's remarks here. Deputy Convener, I've watched the slow and steady decline of this dominant building in Crieff. I once did live in Crieff. And in fact, I owned a property adjoining it. And I have personally dealt with emergency repairs and maintenance within that property. Due to, well, I had water ingressing into the property due to the poor and in fact no maintenance of the roof of the Drummond Arms, of the chimney stacks and of the gutters. I've since disposed of the property, Lisa, so don't panic. The ownership changed, as you've highlighted, at the point of the £325,000 purchase. That is when that building really declined because it became empty. The roof at that point, lead was stolen off the roof. I mean, I'm surprised the roof is still standing. But this decline has really come about through an absentee owner who has managed to carry out no basic maintenance. In fact, you couldn't even identify at times who the owner was. So the rot had started before the community trust became owners of the building. And unfortunately, it's just carried on. So I too agree with what Councillor Donaldson has suggested there, that we need a tighter legislation coming out of government to deal with people who do this, buy buildings, choose not to insure them, maintain them, even if they are empty. Council budgets cannot take more and more examples of this. We are going to find ourselves possibly considering more of it. So I do believe that governments need to be more realistic about the legislation to property owners and the need to maintain their buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. And next to comment is Deputy Provost Andrew Parrott.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. This sadly is one of those cases where the commercial market has failed and the local authority, for reasons of public safety, becomes the actor of last resort. And it's interesting that the convener mentions Ayr Station Hotel, because whilst the debate has been going on, I just looked up some of the figures associated with Ayr Station Hotel, and with a owner there who has fought tooth and nail against the public safety interest of South Ayrshire Council over a period of, I think, about 9 years now. The figures: South Ayrshire Council has spent £600,000 per annum on scaffolding and has recently spent £6.6 million on demolishing the south end of the building. I couldn't find the figures for the north end, so I think that puts into context that actually we're lucky that we haven't got a bigger problem. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor John Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. It is indeed a very challenging report for the committee, and it's not an ideal position by any means, but without doubt the safety of the public is and has to be paramount, and hence why we must intervene now and make this building secure. and not just for the residents, but also for the businesses round about it, the traffic flowing through the A85 and visitors to the area. It's only right that we examine the procedures which have led to this situation and look to learn as a council any lessons that come from this. We can't afford to find ourselves in this situation elsewhere in Perth and Kinross in the future. So I support the report, and I also support the additional report that you've requested. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Duff. Councillor Dave Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, but I think the key here is the question of a stitch in time. I think there are a number of properties around Perth and Kinross that are in an equal state. So the Glenfarg Hotel in Glenfarg, for example, that's probably back where this hotel was back in 2019. But I think as a council, we need to look and consider what buildings might be coming up to see whether we can step in to avoid paying a lot more money if it gets to the point where it's going to come down with a puff of wind. So what I'm supporting the motion today, but I think we do need to look ahead and look at what we've got out there to try and evaluate how big the problem is.
Yep, thank you. And Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks. Whilst recognising the overriding safety concerns that make it imperative that we agree the recommendations of the report, Convener, would like to say that we, is particularly in the light of the comments just made by Councillor Cuthbert, we can't afford to be bailing out another failed community asset regeneration programme to the tune of £3 million, and we can't afford to take on the responsibilities that properly lie with buildings owners who've let their buildings dilapidate into a state of disrepair. So we can't let anybody labour under the misapprehension that this is setting a precedent that the council's here to foot the bill when projects unravel. And this is unique, as both the mover and seconder of the report have said. If necessary, and for the avoidance of doubt, I'm happy to propose an amendment to insert the word full in line 3 of paragraph 5.3 between undertakes and demolition, or perhaps you can just accept that, because I don't really want to have any lingering doubt or dubiety that the facade of the building is going to be propped up at huge expense to the council and limiting the options that the council has to either develop the site or sell it on. There does need to be lessons learned, so I really welcome the fact that the scrutiny inquiry or scrutiny are going to conduct an inquiry into this. I really want to try and avoid having 2020 hindsight, but I think given the scale of the intervention and the cost of it, the council does need to look at how it deals with community asset transfers and what are the most appropriate vehicles to award public money to. And I appreciate the difficulty that arises, because if you don't have a limited liability vehicle, then very few people are going to take on projects if they think that they're going to be personally liable for or on the hook for up to £3 million. But I think we need to check whether other types of groups, companies limited by guarantee, CICs, SKIOs, or community benefit societies, offer any better protection to the council's interest, and also how do we get a real handle on groups' capability and abilities to actually deliver on projects. Have they got the skill set and resources to deliver those projects? And I recognise that we can't be risk averse in this because we've got so many properties that we need to go down the community asset transfer or long lease to move out of the council's responsibility. But I think we still need to be rigorous in future and double check, as scrutiny will, are our processes up to the job of assessing those groups and the existing processes and procedures. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Stewart, I am would be happy to have full demolition in there, because we have to have certainty, and we don't want to be here discussing committing extra capital funding towards retaining a facade, which would then mean that there would be nothing that we could do successfully to redevelop the area. So if the committee are happy and my seconder are happy to accept that into the motion, I welcome it.
Thanks, Vice Convener.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Vice Convener. It was just to say that, or to reconfirm or reaffirm that the Scrutiny and Performance Committee were discussing a call for review of a call for topics for future review, and I put your suggestion, and that was agreed unanimously. We're looking to draw up terms of reference for a scrutiny review, hopefully to bring them back for the special meeting that we've got arranged in December to look at a number of scrutiny review issues. But I think just to add reassurance to members who've spoken today, that the topics that we have or the areas that you've pointed out for review will double back and look at this discussion and make a note of all of the things that members have brought up today to include in those terms of reference.
Thanks. I have, before I got Lisa's point of clarity, I welcome the involvement of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee and their willingness to look at the reasons why we are here and look for different ways of maybe doing things. So, Lisa Simpson.
Yeah, it was just to sort of make some distinctions here about what we're dealing with the Drummond Arms, and also where some of the other chat has taken us. This wasn't a community asset transfer. This was an acquisition, and we find ourselves with a dangerous building. Had it not been transferred to Darrell, we probably would have still been in the same position because we had a negligent owner. So it's just to make the distinction that we're not here in a position because we have transferred this asset. This is a distinct matter. But what it does raise is when we do get requests from communities about interest in old buildings that you know, towns and villages have an emotional connection to, that we do need to look at lessons learned here and where Darrell have failed with the best of intentions, and how does that then translate into a process for us looking at community asset transfers?
Thanks for that, Clara. It was useful. And there's many ways that we could end up in this position. So I think what may come out of this is a sense of how it's happening, and when we have to write to government, or we have to engage government and say that this cannot always fall to us. I think it falls, I may be wrong, but I think it falls to the Crown Estate first, but the Crown Estate will not take anything on that is a liability to them. And so they basically say, no, we don't want that because we can't make any money out of it. We'll give it to the local authority to deal with, which is a bit unfortunate. But what I'd like to say then is, can we agree the report with and with the agreement of the insertion of the word "full" for in front of demolition? Agreed. Thank you. And with that, I'm back to the convener because I was going to close the meeting myself, but I can't do that. So, sorry, convener.
Right, and I think that is the end of this meeting, and the next meeting of Finance and Resources will be on Wednesday, the 5th of February. So thank you, everyone. Thanks.